I never liked fuss. I liked quiet mornings with the sun spilling across the water, the smell of damp earth after rain, and the creak of an old wooden bridge that led to my little slice of paradise. Most people thought the bridge was insignificant, just a couple of planks and beams stretching over the narrow creek, but to me, it was everything. Built by my grandfather in the 1950s, it had survived floods, ice, and storms that would have flattened newer constructions without a second thought. It was narrow, yes, only wide enough for a single car, and weight limits were posted in faded paint. Most visitors, friends, mail carriers, the occasional delivery driver, respected it. That was the rhythm of life here, calm, predictable, and simple. That is, until her. Her name was Diane Morrison, though around the neighborhood, she had earned the unofficial title, HOA Karen. She was a force of nature wrapped in tailored suits and pearl necklaces, with a voice like a gavel and a glare sharp enough to cut steel. She lived at the end of the cul-de-sac and had appointed herself the ultimate authority on property lines, paint colors, lawn heights, and now, apparently, bridge safety. At first, I laughed off her emails and phone calls. Your bridge is a safety hazard. You're violating HOA codes. I suggest you consult with the board immediately. The repetition was almost comical, like a parrot squawking over and over. But then the tone shifted. Threats crept in, subtle but unmistakable. Venus. Legal action. If anyone is injured, you'll be held personally liable. I tried diplomacy first. I sent her the structural report from a licensed engineer. I reminded her that the bridge was privately owned and that any changes to weight limits or signage were at my discretion. She dismissed it all, citing some obscure clause buried in the HOA bylaws, and suddenly my peaceful mornings were filled with anxiety. It escalated slowly, almost imperceptibly. First, she installed warning signs on my property line, without permission, of course. Then she sent over an inspector who had no legal right to be there, taking measurements, jotting notes, and looking smug. Every encounter made my blood boil, but I kept it inside. I didn't want a feud. I wanted my property to remain mine. But that's when the real threat arrived. The cement trucks. I had noticed them first in the late summer. Massive, rumbling machines, gleaming metal, and spinning barrels of wet concrete, inching down my road like predators. I didn't think much at first, construction maybe. But then I realized, Diane had somehow convinced contractors that my bridge could handle industrial loads. I nearly laughed when I saw the first truck crawl across the narrow planks. The bridge groaned, wood fibers creaking like a scream, but the truck made it across. I waited until it was gone before pacing the length of my property, checking every beam, every joint. The damage wasn't catastrophic yet, but it was enough to send a clear message. She was testing me, testing the bridge, testing boundaries. And I realized, staring down at the splintering wood and hairline cracks, that if I didn't act, this would only get worse. That night, I sat at my desk, papers spread before me, a dim lamp casting shadows across the room. I drew diagrams, weighed legal implications, called engineers. I wasn't going to lose millions of dollars in property value because some self-appointed dictator wanted to prove a point. I had a plan carefully. It would take patience, precision, and perhaps a little cunning, but I knew one thing for certain. The bridge wasn't going to survive her recklessness, and neither would she, not without paying for every reckless decision. By the end of the week, the pattern was clear. She was coming back. More trucks. Bigger loads. Every day, she pushed further, daring me to react. And I knew then that this wasn't just about a bridge. This was about control. About pride, about proving who really had the power in this quiet little neighborhood. I smiled, quietly, calculatedly, because I had a plan, and when it unfolded, the fallout would be spectacular. The week after the first cement truck crossed my bridge, the chaos intensified. Diane Morrison wasn't subtle. She never had been. Within days, I received another flurry of emails. This time, she had enlisted the help of the HOA board, a gaggle of yes-men and women eager to show allegiance. They cited community standards, shared responsibility, and even claimed that my bridge posed a liability not only to me but to the entire neighborhood. I read the messages carefully. One phrase caught my attention. We expect compliance by next Monday, or further action will be taken. Compliance. Such a loaded word. The underlying threat was obvious. She wanted to force me into a corner, probably to get me to pay for some unnecessary reinforcement or to cede control entirely. I decided it was time to stop playing defense. I needed a plan. Step 1. Understand the bridge's true limits. I called Alex, an old civil engineer friend with a taste for creative problem-solving. Together, we inspected every beam, bolt, and plank. I learned things I hadn't noticed before. The wood had subtle warping, the support beams weren't treated to modern industrial standards, and the load limit posted decades ago was far lower than the HOA imagined. In other words, Diane was skating on a dangerous assumption. Step 2. Document everything. I installed hidden cameras along the road leading to my property, capturing every delivery truck, every vehicle crossing the bridge. I even measured weights and axle counts, noting patterns and frequency. Diane's obsession with cement trucks wasn't random. She was testing limits, seeing if she could provoke damage without liability. Step 3. Research legal angles. The HOA had its bylaws, but those only extended so far. Private property laws, easement rights, and municipal ordinances were on my side. I pored over zoning codes, bridge regulations, and environmental protections. Slowly, a plan began to emerge, one that would hold the HOA accountable for any recklessness while leaving me completely above board. Step 4. Engineering the trap. I couldn't simply break the bridge. That would be illegal, and my conscience wouldn't allow it. No, this required finesse, strategic reinforcements, selective warnings, and weight-sensitive deterrents. I installed subtle reinforcements that could bear my vehicles comfortably, but would fail spectacularly under the industrial loads Diane kept sending. Nothing about it was illegal. I didn't tamper with public infrastructure, and all posted limits were accurate, but it created a ticking time bomb only she could trigger. Meanwhile, Diane's escalation continued. Every morning, massive trucks lumbered across my bridge. Every morning I documented, I recorded, and I smirked quietly. She was predictable, arrogant, certain that rules didn't apply to her. And every day, she got closer to the edge I had so carefully engineered. The neighborhood whispered about the tension. Gossip traveled faster than cement trucks, and I could feel eyes on me, watchful, uncertain, wondering if I'd finally snap. I didn't snap. I waited. Patience was part of the trap. Then came the final inspection email. Diane, in full Karen mode, declared that she would personally oversee the next delivery to ensure the bridge could handle the load. Her tone was smug, almost gleeful. She thought she had me backed into a corner. Little did she know, every detail had already been planned. The night before the inspection, I reviewed the schematics with Alex one last time. We double-checked stress points, measured exact weight tolerances, and ensured the cameras were perfectly hidden. Everything was ready. By morning, Diane arrived in a rented executive SUV, followed by 2 cement trucks. She strutted across my driveway like a queen, clipboard in hand, issuing commands and snapping photos of the bridge's surface. Her self-satisfaction was palpable. I waved politely from the porch. "Good morning, Diane," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I hope you're prepared for the inspection." She didn't notice the subtle signs. The minuscule cracks we'd reinforced, the clever redistribution of weight, the hidden sensors. We had thought of everything. Her arrogance blinded her to every detail. That afternoon, I stepped back and let the scene unfold. Every truck she sent across would now become a calculation in the trap. Every ton of cement, every axle, every wheel position mattered. And she didn't realize that the bridge and her pride were about to betray her in the most spectacular way possible. By evening, the first truck had returned, slightly off balance, but still intact. Diane's confidence was unshaken. She was relentless, convinced that she could intimidate me into compliance. Little did she know, she was accelerating toward a financial disaster that would dwarf anything she had imagined. I leaned back in my chair, sipping tea, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and anticipation. Soon, very soon, the game would end. And I would emerge with more than just the quiet of my property restored. I would emerge with justice, meticulously calculated, irreversible, and unforgettable. The morning the bridge failed was calm.
Too calm.
The kind of quiet that feels staged, like the world itself is holding its breath. I woke early, made coffee, and sat on the porch watching mist rise from the creek. The bridge looked innocent enough from a distance, aged wood, steel braces darkened by time, no visible sign of weakness. That was the beauty of it. Anyone who didn't understand load distribution, shear stress, and fatigue failure would think it was perfectly fine. Diane arrived just after 8. She was louder than usual, heels clicking against the gravel, voice already sharp as she barked instructions into her phone. Behind her, 2 cement trucks idled, engines rumbling low and heavy, shaking the ground beneath them. Each one weighed more than 10 times the posted limit of the bridge. I recorded everything.
Time-stamped.
GPS tagged.
Clear audio.
Proceed, Diane ordered, waving the first truck forward. The driver hesitated. I could see it in his posture. He knew this wasn't right. "Ma'am," he said, leaning out the window, "this bridge doesn't look rated for." Diane cut him off instantly. "It's been inspected. It's fine."
Drive.
That sentence would later cost her millions. The truck rolled forward. The bridge groaned, deeper than before, like an animal in pain. The planks flexed. Bolts strained. The reinforced sections did exactly what they were designed to do. Hold, just barely. The truck crossed successfully, splashing through a puddle at the far end. Diane smirked. She turned toward me. "See," she said loudly, making sure everyone heard. "Completely safe." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The second truck moved into position. This one was heavier. Different axle configuration. Full load. The moment its front wheels hit the center span, I knew. Alex had predicted it within a margin of seconds. There was a sharp crack, loud enough to echo through the trees. Then another. The sound wasn't explosive. It was worse. It was final. The center support failed. The bridge didn't collapse all at once. It sagged, twisted, and then gave way in a slow, horrifying motion. The truck tipped sideways, concrete sloshing violently inside the barrel. One rear wheel snapped through the decking. The driver screamed. Diane screamed louder. The entire structure folded into the creek with a thunderous splash. Mud, water, and debris shot into the air. The truck stopped just short of fully submerging, wedged at a sickening angle, half supported by broken beams. Silence followed. Then chaos. The driver scrambled out, shaking, pale, covered in splinters and mud. Neighbors came running. Someone called 911. Diane stood frozen, clipboard dropped in the dirt, mouth open, face drained of color. I walked down calmly. "Is everyone okay?" Asked, already knowing the answer. She rounded on me, hysterical. "Your bridge collapsed. This is your fault. You're going to jail." I pointed, slowly, deliberately, to the large, weathered sign posted at the entrance. "Private bridge, max load 3 tons. And no commercial vehicles." Then I pointed to her. "You ordered them to cross." Emergency services arrived within minutes. Firefighters stabilized the truck. Police took statements. Environmental officers began assessing cement leakage into the creek. Insurance adjusters showed up before noon. Diane talked, and talked, and talked. She contradicted herself 3 times in under 10 minutes. She claimed HOA authority over private property. She admitted ordering the trucks forward. She dismissed weight limits as suggestions. Every word was recorded. By afternoon, the scene was taped off. The creek was declared environmentally compromised. Cleanup crews were called in. The cement truck company immediately denied responsibility, citing recorded warnings and Diane's direct instructions. The HOA's insurance provider arrived next. They took one look at the footage, the signage, the permits, and the property records, and went very quiet. That's when Diane realized something was wrong. She pulled me aside, voice trembling now. "We can handle this internally," she whispered. "There's no need to escalate." I smiled, not unkindly. It already has. By sunset, the story had spread. News vans parked at the entrance. Headlines started forming. Private bridge collapse after HOA orders heavy trucks to cross. And this was just the beginning. Because the bridge wasn't the most expensive thing that failed that day. The real collapse, the legal one, was still coming. The day after the bridge collapse, I woke to a neighborhood buzzing like a disturbed hive. News crews parked along the cul-de-sac, drones hovered over the creek, and Diane Morrison, once the queen of self-appointed authority, was a whirlwind of panic, flustered phone calls, and fuming emails. I didn't answer any messages. I didn't need to. I had waited months for this. The insurance adjusters arrived first. They were polite, professional, and extremely thorough. They examined the footage, the bridge specifications, the posted weight limits, and most importantly, Diane's own statements. Within an hour, their verdict was delivered bluntly. We cannot cover the damages. Liability clearly rests with the party that ordered the trucks across a private bridge. Diane's face went pale. She sputtered. But it's an HOA matter. They're supposed to cover. The adjuster held up a hand. This is not a covered event. It is explicitly excluded under your policy because the insured knowingly violated posted weight limits. I let her stew. Next came the environmental fines. The creek had been contaminated by the partial collapse and the cement that had leaked. Local authorities issued a notice of violation to the HOA and the responsible contractors. Diane had insisted on forcing the trucks across despite multiple warnings and signage. The fines were astronomical, far beyond anything she had imagined. Tens of thousands for each day of remediation, plus long-term environmental oversight costs. Then the lawsuit started. Not from me, but from the contractors. The first truck company demanded reimbursement for the damaged vehicle, lost contracts, and environmental penalties. They cited Diane's direct instructions as proof that the HOA, not the private landowner, was legally responsible. Another lawsuit came from neighbors whose properties had been damaged by flooding and debris from the collapse. Diane tried to scramble. Emails flew like wildfire, frantic letters, emergency HOA meetings, desperate calls to lawyers who hadn't yet seen the full footage. But it was too late. The evidence was airtight. She had overstepped, ignored posted weight limits, and forced contractors into a situation that was clearly unsafe. By midweek, the HOA board was in chaos. Members were resigning, arguing over liability, and trying to shift blame. Some had their own homes at risk because of easement violations and mismanagement. The once powerful HOA empire Diane had built was unraveling faster than anyone could react. Meanwhile, I remained calm. I took a walk along the creek, observing the wreckage of the bridge. Splintered wood, twisted steel, mud streaks. Every detail was a reminder that meticulous planning beats brute force every time. I had stayed within the law, left warnings in plain sight, and recorded every violation. The result was inevitable. Diane's phone calls to me became pleading, then demanding, then accusatory, and finally silent. She tried to threaten me with legal action, but her own statements, emails, and instructions were self-incriminating. Every lawyer she hired had to advise the same thing. She was fully exposed. By the end of the week, the situation had escalated to millions in potential damages. Environmental remediation alone was projected at over $500,000. Lawsuits for property damage, truck replacement, and lost contracts piled on. And Diane, HOA Karen herself, was at the center of it all, personally liable because she had acted outside her authority and ignored posted regulations. The neighborhood was buzzing, but not with gossip anymore. People were cautious, respectful, even a little fearful. Diane had lost her aura of authority. Where she had once ruled with a clipped sentence and a glare, there was now chaos, embarrassment, and fear. And me. I walked quietly, smiling just slightly, knowing that months of patience, planning, and careful observation had culminated in this.
The bridge was gone, yes.
But justice, precise and unrelenting, had been delivered. I sipped my evening tea that Friday, looking across the creek. Repairs would come eventually. Insurance wouldn't touch them. Diane would pay. And the neighborhood, once intimidated by her self-assigned power, would remember who truly held control over their private world. This was only the beginning of the financial and legal unraveling, but already, the trap had achieved exactly what I wanted. Her arrogance had cost her millions, and her reputation was in ruins. Winter was settling in, and the creek had begun to freeze along the edges, reflecting the icy tension that had consumed the neighborhood. Diane Morrison, once the undisputed HOA enforcer, was now a cautionary tale whispered over fences and in coffee shops. Her empire of authority had crumbled, and the fallout was only getting worse. The first court case opened with Diane and the HOA facing multiple claims: contractor damages, environmental fines, and neighbor lawsuits. The judge was meticulous, reviewing every photo, video, email, and engineering report. Diane tried to argue that the bridge collapse was an accident, but the evidence was devastating. Recorded footage of her directing heavy trucks, posted weight limit signage, and recorded warnings from engineers. Her lawyers tried to redirect blame, citing shared responsibility, but the judge interrupted sharply. You, Diane Morrison, personally authorized the crossing of vehicles in clear violation of posted safety limits. Liability is yours. The courtroom was silent except for her labored breathing. I sat quietly, almost invisible, watching the unspooling of a hubris-fueled disaster. The verdict came swiftly. Diane was personally liable for millions of dollars in damages, including full replacement costs for the cement truck's environmental remediation of the creek and surrounding land compensation to neighbors for property damage. Legal fees for all lawsuits filed. The HOA itself was dissolved. Members resigned in droves, fearing personal exposure, and the organization's assets were seized to pay for some of the damages. Diane tried to appeal, but her statements, recordings, and reckless actions made it impossible. The appellate courts upheld the judgment without hesitation. For Diane, the personal cost was catastrophic. Her home became difficult to sell due to the pending liens. Her reputation was destroyed, not just among neighbors, but across local business and civic networks. Articles in regional newspapers chronicled her hubris, often citing her direct instructions to the cement truck drivers as a case study in negligence. Meanwhile, I quietly began the reconstruction of the bridge. Using permits, engineers, and contractors, I rebuilt it stronger and safer, while still maintaining its old charm. The new bridge was properly rated, environmentally sound, and legally compliant. I even left the old sign in place as a reminder. Private bridge, max load 3 tons. No commercial vehicles. Life returned to a sense of calm. Mail carriers returned without fear. Friends laughed about the cement truck saga, carefully avoiding gossip about Diane's downfall. And I sat on the porch some mornings, sipping coffee, watching the mist rise from the creek, feeling a quiet satisfaction. Months later, Diane moved away quietly, selling her home at a loss. I heard she tried to start over in a different neighborhood, but her HOA infamy followed her. She had learned, far too late, that arrogance and disregard for rules, even suggested ones, come with a cost. I never gloated publicly. I didn't need to. Justice had been precise, methodical, and final. Every decision, every truck, every crack in the bridge had led to the outcome. My patience and planning had paid off, ensuring that those who abused authority faced the consequences. And so, the little bridge, once threatened by arrogance, stood stronger than ever. The creek continued to flow beneath it, undisturbed, and I had my quiet mornings back. Only now, there was a deep, unspoken understanding. Some forces, no matter how powerful, cannot bend the law, physics, or patience. The HOA Karen saga became part of neighborhood lore, a warning that nobody, no matter how self-assured, is above rules or accountability. And as for me, I had learned something too. The best victories are the ones that unfold slowly, quietly, and inevitably. Justice, like the creek beneath the bridge, finds its way, even if it takes time.